David Smoak. A lot of you have reacted already to at least the story by theathletic.com. These are guys in college football that cover the game, like Andy Staples, Max Olson, and others that do a great job of it. And it's just out there that perhaps Brigham Young is one that is targeted. That makes sense. Now, there may be others. The good news is there's a subcommittee to discuss that. Whether they add anybody or not, we don't know. But a lot of you have already fired off on it. 254-339-1122 is the text line, and the chat room is wide open. David Scott, if you add Brigham Young, doesn't that mean you have to add another team out west? For example, maybe Colorado State. You still have to bridge the gap as well to West Virginia.
Well, I mean, yeah and no. How was the bridge gapped with Oklahoma and Texas? I mean, what's the difference? If Oklahoma, what's the difference? Is there a team that's now not in the Big 12 that was closer to West Virginia?
No.
That's what I'm saying. So you don't really have to bridge the gap to West Virginia per se, because it's the same length of bridge that it was previously without Oklahoma, or with or without Oklahoma and Texas. So, yeah, I mean, ideally, that's where a Cincinnati would come into play, though, to get somebody that actually is somewhat close, or a UCF for that matter. I mean, I think both of them make sense as far as Eastern expansion goes. BYU, obviously, with Western expansion makes you think of, potentially a Boise State. They've been somebody that's been off-mentioned, or a Colorado State. I haven't heard them talked about a ton, but, maybe there's some interest there. I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, maybe the way to go is you've got the Central States pretty much locked up the way it is right now. So why not, take a couple out west, couple out east, expand both ways, and, that would make a lot of sense to me for sure.
All right, Craig Smoak, with that, Paul Catalina, that doesn't mean you may not, you also add somebody from that same region if there's something that's out there. But right now, other than Colorado State, is there another team? I know we've heard others that have brought up schools in the Mountain or West time zone. Is Colorado State the only one out there that would even be something to glance at?
Besides Boise, right?
Yeah, well, but Boise State, to me, I think Boise State, UCF, either Memphis or Cincinnati and Brigham Young's a pretty good foursome, but that's me. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I wouldn't necessarily stop at 4. If everybody else is going to 14 or 16, then unless there's just a negative TV response to that, where they say, listen, you guys get to 12, be the actual Big 12, and that's fine with us, and you're going to get $20 million or $25 million a year. I think given the fact that they could be at $9 million a year, I'd be happy with that, guys. But I don't know if Colorado State does anything for you, because of where they are in Colorado, because they're not, University of Colorado in Boulder is closer to Denver. I mean, that would be more of the Denver market. The rest of Colorado, I'm not familiar with the TV market, rankings outside of Denver. Denver's a great TV market, but Colorado State doesn't necessarily get you that, or necessarily it's also not the, does that do anything for you anywhere? But Boise State, BYU, UCF, Memphis, Cincinnati. I mean, that's 5 schools that get you to 13, and then start having real conversations about who else. Maybe Colorado State gets you to 14. Maybe that's why.
There's one team that we haven't mentioned, and that's Houston. I mean, where do they fall into this?
And there's a lot of feedback on Houston on the chat room. We'll get to that.
I think I'm not all for. Okay. I want to make it very clear, because I've made this point like a billion times. It's not a personal decision on my part. It's a simply, hey, if I had my preference, if I was Mac Rhodes or TCU or Texas Tech, I would not want another Texas team, because it just splits the pie even further. However, if they are the right school to bring in, no matter what it does to the other Texas schools, then you have to bring them in. The Houston market right now is dominated by the SEC with Texas. I'm just lumping them into Houston already as an SEC team. So between A&M, LSU, and Texas, I mean, that's the Houston market. You're not going to go get Rice. They do nothing for you. Houston Baptist, of course not, right? So the only team you really have down there would be like a Tulane, but that's not even going to get you most of New Orleans, much less Houston, like LSU does. So it's Houston. I mean, money-wise, they're fit. Competition-wise, they're fit. Good basketball program we saw this past year. I think they've got all the tools. The only thing I have against them, and it's not even really me against them, it's just that Texas thing, right? But if you tell me that the Pac-12 is not expanding right now, but that's not to say they don't in a couple years, and if Houston's right at the top of their list, would you want that egg on your face if you're the big whatever, that you just let Houston slide on out to another Power 5 and actually eclipse the teams that you already have? So you might almost have to defensively take a Houston, I would think, or at least take that into consideration, because the last thing you want is to skip over them and then they go, thrive somewhere else. And to me, out of all the teams other than BYU, I think they might be the most attractive option for all the other conferences out there.
We've mentioned this before. And by the way,